Makeshift bridge used by illegal immigrants to enter South Africa destroyed. The SAPS had demonstrated its seriousness in fighting against illicit mining and other criminal activities by destroying a makeshift bridge near Beitbridge border between South Africa and Zimbabwe. Police said that in a concerted effort to prevent and combat serious crimes, last week they destroyed a man-made bridge which was built over the Limpopo River near the Beitbridge Port of Entry. SAPS spokesperson Lieutenant Colonel Amanda Fakes said border policing members destroyed on the South African-Zimbabwe borderline found the bridge while patrolling the border fence line. Van Fake said the illegal bridge was less than 1 kilometer east of the Beitbridge Port of Entry and reportedly used to smuggle goods and people into and out of South Africa. Through the expertise of the SAPS explosive section, the bridge was successfully destroyed ahead of Limpopo province's rain season, she said. Van Vick said the border policing members deployed in Limpopo form part of Operation Vala Umgodi, the government's response to address illicit mining activities in the country. Operation Vala Umgodi, established in December 2023, is inclusive of the SAPS, SANDF, Department of Mineral Resources and Energy DMRE, Department of Home Affairs DHA, and other law enforcement agencies. These multidisciplinary operations are being carried out in the 7 identified hotspot provinces, namely the 3 states, Gauteng, KwaZulu-Natal, Limpopo, Mpumalanga, the Northern Cape and Northwest, said Van Veek. Earlier this year, the Border Management Authority BMA said it intercepted and prevented more than 281,000 people from unlawfully entering South Africa since the initial deployment of border guards last year. Police vowed to arrest any illegal immigrant found on the wrong side of the law. Between Thursday and Friday, the integrated Vala Umgodi operations led to the arrest of 13 suspects in Moinoi in Northwest. The arrest was in relation to the contravention of Section 49, Subsection 1, Subsection A of the Immigration Act, Act Number 13 of 2002. They are expected to appear at the Beitbridge Magistrates Court on Monday. In another incident reported in Stilfontein on Thursday, police were called to locate mineshaft after mine security reported that they apprehended illegal miners on level 10. 6 illegal miners were found, and on searching the suspects, 7 pieces of gold were found hidden in the dreadlocks of one of the suspects. In another arrest on Friday, police were called back to the same shaft in Stilfontein, where 6 more illegal miners were found on level 14. During the search, a backpack was found with more gold inside. All 12 Stilfontein suspects were nabbed for contravention of Section 49, Subsection 1, Subsection A of the Immigration Act, Act Number 13 of 2002, and for illegal mining, and will appear before the local magistrates court on Monday, said Northwest Police spokesperson Adele Mayberg. In the meantime, Minister Mackenzie and Moseha to receive remains of SA activists from Zimbabwe and Zambia. The government of South Africa conceded that even though the process to repatriate political activists and freedom fighters who died in different countries has been slow, process in being made to exhume and bring their mortal remains. As South Africa commemorates 30 years of freedom and democracy, government, led by the Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture, Gayton Mackenzie, and Minister of Defense and Military Veterans, Angie Moseha, will on Wednesday receive the remains of 49 former liberation fighters who passed away in exile in Zimbabwe and Zambia. The remains of the activists and freedom fighters are set to arrive at Waterkloof Air Force Base in Tshwane on Wednesday. Following the arrival of the mortal remains, government will host an official homecoming ceremony on Friday at Freedom Park, also Tshwane, to mark the return of the mortal remains of Repatriation fighters to their country of their birth. Thereafter, reburial ceremony will be held in the provinces of their origin, ensuring they are laid to rest with the dignity and respect they deserve. In an interview with the broadcaster Newsroom Africa on Monday, ANC International Relations Subcommittee Deputy Chairperson Obed Bapela said there will be more exhumations and repatriations in the future. Better late than never, and however it is not the first time that we have already brought back almost 100 remains, but it was a very slow program at the time. This is the first time that we are bringing massive 49 at a go. In the past, we brought them in 10s, 5s and 2s, he said. We have 1,000 people buried across various countries in Africa, in Europe, in America, Latin America, which we need to bring back over a period of time. We hope this process will be hastier and regular to ensure that those remains of our heroes and heroines are brought back finally to their resting country to rest in peace next to their loved ones, families. Bapela said majority of the fighters being repatriated from Zambia and Mozambique were members of the African National Congress, but government is repatriating activists and fighters from different political formations and liberation movements which waged the war against apartheid. Other freedom fighters were members of the Pan-Africanist Congress, PAC, and the grassroots anti-apartheid activists movement, Black Consciousness Movements, BCM. Last week, IOA reported that several South African families whose relatives were political activists who migrated and later died and were buried in Zimbabwe had traveled to the neighboring country to perform rituals of exhuming and repatriating their loved ones. This homecoming ceremony will be hosted under this year's Heritage Month theme, celebrating the lives of our heroes and heroines who laid down their lives for our freedom. Meanwhile, Catherine Sikalala, one of the family's representatives, spoke to SABC News in Zimbabwe, where she has traveled to collect the mortal remains of her relative, Edna Nomakosazana Mkabasa, who was born in 1922 and passed away in 1987. Mkabasa, a nurse by profession, worked in Zambia before relocating to Zimbabwe, where she later died. She was a nurse who was recruited to come and work in Zambia, so she came in the mid-60s. She was based in Zambia, Sikalala told the SABC. While there, she was also helping with the logistics for the African National Congress because we had to fight the war from all fronts. The war for freedom was not just soldiers with their AK-47s. She said while working at the hospital in Zambia, Mkabasa was able to nurse South African freedom fighters, including Duma Nokwe, Secretary General of the African National Congress from 1958 to 1969. He actually passed away in her hands. When he passed away, she then moved to Harare from Zambia. She passed away here on October 16, 1987. Sikalala has saluted the South African government for initiating the exhumation and repatriation process, adding that the families need closure. And lastly, South Africa is emerging as an interesting case study on how to build a country. Or should that be how not to build a country? In 1999, I wrote a note in my journal that said, "Is South Africa the world's last experiment with classic democracy?" The evolution of the geopolitical landscape over the last 20 years points to the need to consider more refined and improved iterations of democracy. The classic majority rule system is becoming increasingly unfit for purpose as countries migrate from being majority monocultural communities to high diverse communities with contradictory expectations. To high diverse communities with often contradictory expectations. Religious, cultural, racial diversities have broken down to the safe walls of traditional monocultural majority societies. But what is more insightful is how traditional minorities have broken their silence at great risk to themselves in majority monocultural democracies. No longer can it be expected of minorities to simply accept majority outcomes that ignore or violate the rights of minorities. South Africa is one of the unique places in the world where this contestation can be studied with a front row seat. A point must be made that the classic European coalition government systems worked well for decades because they were largely monocultural societies. As they changed to becoming multicultural societies, many European elections are raising concerns about protecting traditional values, which has led to right-wing populist rhetoric. At its granular level, most monocultural democracies are not prepared for people who enter their society and don't wish to be absorbed into its religious, educational, and cultural belief system. Up until the early 2000s, it was expected that people who migrated to majority monocultural societies submerged and silenced themselves in those societies. Today, people migrate and set up visible and vocal alternative minorities, religious, educational, and cultural societies with political aspirations within those societies. Democracy has been abused by monocultural societies because it allows them to practice democracy without attending to the challenges experienced by minorities. The silence of minorities in majority monocultural societies made those democracies believe they were doing well. Minorities did two things to challenge this. They increased their migration into those societies and they doubled up their education. They intensified their own cultural education as well as taking up Western education. They also grew economies that built capital for minority communities. In the US, Donald Trump is feverishly trying to rally the traditional monocultural religious and race base. In the UK, Nigel Farage is desperately trying to sell anti-immigrant fears to his UK constituents. The kind of democracy is no longer the answer. South Africa can potentially lead a global process that may define and improve democracy for the next 1,000 years. Minorities are no longer going to accept being silenced or culturally obliterated. No longer is a Bill of Rights sufficient. No longer should the courts continuously be called on to uphold the rights of minorities. Parliament and its political parties should be largely bound to demonstrate to its citizens that they have addressed the problem of monocultural majoritarianism in diverse societies. To fix this, we're going to need a lot less window dressing and more deep intelligence to produce the necessary new iterations of democracy for the next 1,000 years. This is true for the East, the Middle East, and the West. We either continue to celebrate our feasts of folly or we become the cornerstones to brave new convictions. By Lorenzo A. Davids. And that's it from Egypt, Africa. Stay tuned to our USA political updates.